Chapter 71, The Sixth Floor. Splurt. The short sword pierced the monster's body. This fatal blow caused the creature to instantly dissipate into the air, leaving behind only a purple-blue magic stone fragment on the ground. Alright, that's the last one. Pick up the dropped items, and let's take a short break. Riveria, observing Ace's progress, felt very satisfied. Over the past week, Luke and Ace's performance truly showcased what it meant to be a genius in Riveria's eyes. Luke was understandable. Even before becoming an adventurer, he already possessed considerable strength, and his current performance was to be expected. However, Ace was different. A week ago, although she was more outstanding than typical novice adventurers, she still fell within the category of a newcomer. But now, observing Ace's skillful performance on the fifth floor, it was hard to label her as a mere rookie. Whether in combat capability or familiarity with the dungeon, both Luke and Ace were improving at a remarkable pace. At this rate, Riveria, who had been trying to restrain them from progressing to deeper floors too quickly, might have made a mistake. Sitting on a rock, Riveria watched Luke and Ace picking up their spoils, contemplating whether to take them to the sixth floor ahead of schedule. On the other side, after picking up the dropped items on the ground and preparing to find a rock to sit on, Luke was approached by Ace. "Give them to me, I'll hold them." Ace gently tugged at Luke's sleeve, extending her hands towards him. Perhaps aware that she was the weakest and least useful in this trio, Ace was exceptionally proactive in other matters. One of the most typical examples was carrying the loot. Knowing her role was relatively minor, Ace always volunteered for the logistic tasks. She hoped that by making efforts in these areas, she could contribute to the team. Carrying more loot would obviously affect Ace's movements due to the increased weight, but it was also a form of training. With Riveria and Luke watching nearby, there was no danger, so they allowed Ace to do this willingly. As a result, Ace, who originally intended to contribute more to the team, unknowingly turned her actions into a form of exercise observed by Riveria and Luke. However, Ace remained completely unaware of this. She was simply happy to be helping the team. Riveria and Luke couldn't bear to reveal the truth to her, and so the three of them maintained this unspoken understanding. Luke looked at Ace's outstretched hand, smiled at her, and then placed the recently collected loot into Ace's hands. "Then I'll leave these to you, but make sure to hold them securely." Got it." Watching Ace vigorously nod with a cute expression, even Riveria couldn't help but smile. The break didn't last long, and soon the three of them entered the monster grinding phase again. However, this time, influenced by Luke and Ace's performance, Riveria decided to take them to the sixth floor. In the dungeon, the first 5 floors were considered the novice area, where only kobolds and goblins would appear under normal circumstances. Starting from the 6th floor, they would enter the upper part of the dungeon, encountering entirely new types of monsters. When Luke and Ace learned that Riveria intended to take them deeper into the dungeon, both of them were somewhat happy. Luke was looking forward to encountering different kinds of monsters. Despite his formidable strength now, he hadn't seen much of these non-human creatures before. Witnessing unknown creatures firsthand would undoubtedly spark anyone's interest, and this curiosity was precisely what an adventurer should possess. Ace, on the other hand, simply felt that she must have grown stronger to be allowed to venture deeper into the dungeon. She knew that this team had been taking care of her, forcing them to stay in the novice area for a whole week. Otherwise, with Luke's strength and Riveria guiding them, they could have reached the middle floors at the very least. Being able to enter the 6th floor now clearly indicated that her growth was recognized, making Ace particularly happy. It seemed the dungeon had no intention of disappointing Luke and Ace's expectations. The moment they entered the 6th floor, a new type of monster emerged from the ground, attacking them. The killer ant, the most common monster in the upper floors of the dungeon, holding a status similar to goblins in the novice area. It had the appearance of a child-sized, jet-black ant with sharp mandibles and a sturdy exoskeleton. Generally, when insects were magnified to a certain extent, their appearance became quite terrifying. While ants were relatively more normal in this regard, killer ants' crimson eyes combined with the black exoskeleton made them look menacing. The killer ant was actually an unfriendly monster for newcomers, primarily due to its hard exoskeleton. Most novice adventurers were quite impoverished, and gains in the novice area had a very low resale value. This made it challenging for novice adventurers to save money to buy good equipment. However, it was also challenging to penetrate the killer ant's exoskeleton with ordinary iron weapons. Therefore, killer ant is also known as newbie killer for killing a lot of newbie adventurers. However, the typical adventurer's dilemma did not exist for Luke and Ace. Although Finn advised them not to rely too much on equipment, even so, the weapons provided by Loki Familia to newcomers were sufficient for use up to around the 10th floor. Piercing the exoskeleton of the killer ant was clearly not an issue. Ace's performance also confirmed this point. As soon as the monsters appeared, Ace volunteered and charged forward. The short sword in her hand deftly traced 2 arcs in the air, instantly slaying the killer ant. However, just as she was happily about to pick up the magic stone fragments, she heard Riveria's serious voice from behind. "Ace! Don't let your guard down. Watch above you." Upon hearing Riveria's reminder, Ace was suddenly shocked. Without time to regret her momentary complacency, she exerted force and swiftly dodged to the side. Splurt! Splurt! The sound of something piercing into the ground echoed in the place where Ace had been standing before. With a narrow escape from the imminent attack, Ace now had the chance to turn around and look at the spot where she had just been. 2 more killer ants, identical in appearance to the one she had just slain, were pulling their large mandibles out of the ground. Like goblins in the novice area, killer ants were also monsters that acted in groups. Chapter 72, Keeping a Monster as a Pet. Splurt! The blade flashed, and despite their struggle, Luke instantly cut 2 killer ants into 2 pieces. After confirming that the danger was over, Luke walked over to Ace and extended his hand to help her up. As Ace was pulled up by Luke, she still tightly clenched the magic stone fragments she had picked up just now in her hand. Her face bore a mix of lingering fear and regret, and unconsciously, she moved behind Luke, seemingly afraid to face Riveria. Just as Ace had imagined, Riveria walked over with a stern expression and simultaneously scolded her aloud. "Ace! I've reminded you many times, never let your guard down at any moment." Riveria's scolding made Ace shiver, and being frightened, she moved behind Luke once again, seemingly reluctant to face the angry elf royal. Sorry, I know I was wrong." Actually, even without Riveria's scolding, Ace knew she had made a genuine mistake this time. Getting carried away with success is one of the main factors leading to adventurers' deaths in the dungeon, as Riveria had repeatedly mentioned throughout the week. Because of being allowed to enter the 6th floor and feeling recognized, Ace was eager to prove that Riveria's approval was justified. After easily dealing with the killer ants, the overwhelming joy of successfully proving herself enveloped her thoughts. At that moment, Ace didn't even consider whether these monsters might be in a group. Her mind was occupied with picking up the dropped magic stones and sharing her joy with Riveria and Luke. Luke didn't stop Riveria because he knew it was something Ace had to experience. Making mistakes, although not causing severe consequences, can still result in criticism/scolding. Riveria obviously thought so too, and she must let Ace understand the seriousness of the matter. Now, with her and Luke around, even if Ace got carried away, nothing unexpected would happen. However, sooner or later, Ace would have to venture into the dungeon alone, without the protection of others. If she continued like this, she might pay the price at that time. "Ace, if you can't even remain vigilant, I will consider taking you back." Riveria's reprimand made Ace very sad, but more importantly, she felt guilty for dragging down the team. After Riveria finished scolding her, Luke reached out and gently touched Ace's little head, hoping to comfort her in this way. "Let's go, pick up the magic stones. Be more careful not to make Riveria angry next time." "Yeah, I know." After Ace packed up the spoils, the 3 of them continued forward. Although Riveria was angry about Ace's complacency, she also affirmed Ace's strength in slaying the killer ants. Although she frightened Ace, threatening to take them back, she was actually thinking about when to enter the next floor. Ace was very smart, and Riveria had come to understand this through a week of interaction. Ace wouldn't make the same mistake twice. After scolding her and Ace reflecting on her actions, this matter could basically be considered settled. On the 6th floor, there were 2 new types of monsters. Similar to the beginner's area, aside from the group-acting killer ants, there was also a solo-appearing needle rabbit. This monster didn't look terrifying. In fact, it was somewhat cute. It was a white rabbit with a single horn, just a bit larger than usual. The needle rabbit's jumping ability, enhanced by magic and the monster's physique, became quite formidable. If adventurers weren't quick enough in their reaction, they were likely to be injured by its sudden attacks from a distance. Compared to Ace, who was feeling a bit down, Luke was quite excited. The needle rabbit was almost identical to the magical beasts he had imagined. It looked cute and fluffy. Blue starlight fragments appeared on Luke's body, and with a sudden acceleration, he grabbed the needle rabbit in front of him. Despite the constant attacks from the rabbit's horn, blocked by Luke's prana, the creature was still held in his hands. As a monster, the needle rabbit was larger than an ordinary rabbit but still within the size range of a small dog. Riveria, can I take this one home as a pet? Riveria didn't know what to say. She looked at the needle rabbit that Luke had caught and blocked its attacks with prana, feeling a bit sorry for the creature. No. Loki Familia prohibits keeping monsters as pets. Quickly, put it down, cough, quickly kill it. Riveria tried to suppress her emotions, not letting a conflicted expression appear on her face. Oh, okay. Hearing Riveria's response, Luke expressed some regret. With a bit of force, the needle rabbit in his hands turned into black smoke, leaving only a magic stone and surprisingly a drop item. Luke was somewhat surprised as he looked at the material, needle rabbit's tusk, in his hand. He didn't expect that catching a random rabbit would actually give a drop item. Handing the unexpected joy to Ace, Luke and the others continued to move forward. After a whole day of monster hunting in the dungeon, when Luke and the others returned to the surface, the first thing they did was still to exchange their loot for money. As they descended to lower floors, their earnings increased. However, before reaching the 10th floor, most of the magic stones were still fragments. Therefore, even with increased income, it wasn't much. But after this week, Luke and Ace managed to save some money, barely escaping the embarrassment of being penniless. After exchanging their money, when they walked out of the guild gate, Riveria suddenly said to Luke and Ace, "Take a day off tomorrow. You've been continuously exploring the dungeon for a whole week. Occasionally taking a break is necessary. Tomorrow, I have something to do with Loki, so Luke, take Ace and stroll around the city." Hearing Riveria's words, Luke agreed without much thought. Combining work and rest was indeed important, and since coming to Rio, he hadn't really had a chance to explore. Moreover, Luke looked at Ace, whose mood still seemed a bit low. Giving Ace a little break to relax and lighten her mood seemed like a good choice. Ace, on her part, didn't seem to have any objections to this proposal. Seeing Luke agreeing and Ace not opposing, Riveria nodded and said, "Then, Luke, I'll leave Ace in your care tomorrow." Chapter 73, Growth of Ability Values. Accompanied by Luke and Ace, Riveria returned to the Loki Familia's residence, the Twilight Manor. Today was a bit different from usual. Upon returning to the Twilight Manor, the three of them didn't immediately go their separate ways as usual. Instead, led by Riveria, they continued to the deepest part of the Twilight Manor, to the room of the goddess Loki. Walking up to the door of Loki's room, Riveria knocked on the door. Upon hearing the response, "Come in," from inside, she opened the door, first leading Ace inside. As for Luke, he stayed outside the door of his own accord. Today was the day for him and Ace to update their status. Compared to the original protagonist Belcranel, who was the only member of Hestia Familia, and Goddess Hestia would update his status every night, Loki Familia had around 30 members. If they all gathered to update their status on the same night, it would take an exceptionally long time. Therefore, in Loki Familia, status updates were scheduled, and basically every Familia with a certain number of members would choose a similar approach. However, this schedule was not completely fixed. As adventurers leveled up, the speed at which they increased ability values slowed down. First-class adventurers like Finn and Riveria don't need to update their status once a week, let alone every day. They might wait for a month or several months before going to Loki for a status update. Status updates were quick. If no extra actions were taken, it could be done in an instant. Luke didn't wait long outside the door before Riveria, accompanied by Ace, walked out of Loki's room. Seeing Riveria nod at him, Luke knew it was his turn, so he entered Loki's room. The goddess's room was certainly not the same as that of the Familia members, but it wasn't overly extravagant either. If one were to describe Luke and Ace's rooms as comfortable spaces for single occupants, then Loki's room was just about the right size for two people. "Hey, you're here. Don't waste time, sit down quickly." Loki sat cross-legged on the bed, and in front of her was a chair, evidently prepared for Luke. Luke walked over, sat down, removed his upper garment, and turned his back to Loki. Loki took a needle from the set of tools placed on the bed and pricked her index finger, causing fresh red blood to emerge. With this blood-leaking finger, she touched Luke's back and the area near his neck. Next, she began to move her fingers with skilled motions, like signing a signature, drawing a blood-red trajectory on Luke's back, and finally, with a shush, forcefully drew a vertical line. Instantly, it was as if a lock had been opened. Luke's back, which originally had no discernible pattern, quickly displayed a crimson inscription resembling a rune. This complex action was due to Loki placing a lock on the divine runes/hieroglyphs behind Luke. The same lock also existed on Ace. This lock prevented outsiders from seeing the status panel on Luke and Ace's backs. Status panels are displayed through the divine script, commonly known as hieroglyphs. These inscriptions are rarely understood by anyone other than gods. Though rare, it's not non-existent. Within Loki Familia, Finn and Riveria could comprehend most of the divine script/hieroglyphs. P.S. And there's also the future Ace, probably taught by Riveria. Because the status panels of Luke and Ace, especially their skills, were crucial, Loki added this lock to prevent others from seeing their ability values. However, this lock isn't absolutely secure. According to rumors, there's a special potion made from divine blood that can be used to break the lock. So Loki also emphasized to Luke and Ace that their backs should never be touched or shown to unfamiliar strangers. As expected, just like Ace, your attribute growth is terrifyingly fast. After the complex unlocking, the status update took a moment. While recording Luke's ability values on parchment, Loki expressed her amazement. Ace's attribute growth is already quite astonishing. I didn't expect you to be even more extreme. Is it because you had a swordsmanship foundation before? Luke took the imprinted parchment from Loki. Since status panels are displayed in divine script/hieroglyphs, every Familia member, during status update, would have the values imprinted on parchment and translated into common language by the god. One reason for this is for ease of reading, and the other is to allow Familia members to understand them, considering very few can comprehend hieroglyphs. Luke looked at the parchment showing the growth of his ability values. In just 1 week, all his attributes, except for magic power, had reached G rank. This growth rate, in Loki's eyes, is considered incredible. It's worth noting that among the current Oreo residents, it usually takes 3 to 5 years or even nearly 10 years for a level 1 adventurer to advance to level 2. At this rate, you and Ace probably won't need a year to level up. Loki smiled somewhat smugly, already imagining how her children would shock the entire city. Luke was also satisfied with his growth rate, but he was not proud. He knows that in 9 years, the protagonist will appear with all attributes at E rank after 3 days of being an adventurer and rank up to level 2 within a month. However, Luke's calm demeanor disappoints Loki. What's with you? Can't you be a bit happier? This is a compliment from gods. How can you be like Ace? Loki gave Luke's back 2 firm pats. That's why I don't like kids. Anyway, now that your status is updated, go out. Other members will come for updates later. Hearing Loki's complaints, Luke felt a bit helpless, but he knew Loki was mostly joking and not genuinely upset about this trivial matter. Luke, who was pushed out of the door, stood there and sighed. After putting on his shirt, He was about to return to his room when he saw Riveria standing at the doorway. "Ha! Are you waiting for me?" Luke was a bit puzzled. Normally, at this time, Riveria should be back in her room, teaching Ace. "Yeah, I want to give this to you." Riveria withdrew her gaze from Luke's back and handed him 2 scrolls. "Tomorrow, when you take Ace out, help me deliver these to the respective familias labeled on the scroll." Chapter 74, Labyrinth City Orario. 2 familias. Luke took the scrolls and inspected the labels printed on them. Yes, they are the Tien sect familia, located on Northwest Street, and the Goibniu familia, located at the intersection of North and Northwest Street. Riveria provided the locations and names of the 2 familias while pointing at the corresponding scrolls in Luke's hands, indicating which scroll corresponds to which familia. These 2 familias have established long-term cooperative relationships with our Loki familia. If you need anything in the future, you can also visit their shops. Dien sect familia runs a pharmacy, while Goibniu familia is a smith-type familia. Perfect, I was planning to visit Goibniu familia anyway. After listening to Riveria's explanation, Luke nodded and accepted the errand. After that, the 2 chatted briefly, and Riveria left first. She needed to return to her room to provide basic education to Ace. The night quickly passed, and in the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. Luke got up early and was doing some simple exercises in his room, a habit he had maintained for several years. Knock, knock, knock. Just when he had finished his exercise and was about to give his body a little wipe, there was a knock on the door. "Wait a moment, I'll open the door soon." After shouting a response to the person outside, Luke went to the door. Opening the door, he saw Ace standing alone outside quietly. "Did Riveria ask you to come find me?" Turning to let Ace in, Luke asked her. "Yeah, Riveria went out with Loki just now and asked me to stay with you today." Ace walked into the room, found the chair she had sat on last time, sat down, and nodded at Luke in response. "All right, let me tidy up a bit." Luke wiped his body with a towel and quickly put on his clothes. Once ready, he took Ace and began their day of rest in the city. In the labyrinth city of Orario, there are 8 large roads known as main streets. The 8 main streets radiate from the central part of the city, extending in 8 directions: north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, and northwest, all the way to the city wall surrounding the city. The entire city is enclosed by a perfect circular stone wall, with tall tower-like buildings standing in the outer part. As one moves toward the center of the city, the height of the buildings decreases. To better understand the overall appearance of the city, it's akin to a cake cut into 8 equal parts. When distinguishing between various streets, they are usually named according to the cardinal directions, such as North Street, Southeast Street, and so on. Loki Familia's base, Twilight Manor, is located on North Street, also known as the Bustling Street. After leaving the Familia's residence and having breakfast, Luke and Ace made their first stop at Northwest Street, also known as the Adventurer Street. This street gathers the most adventurers in Orario. Numerous weapon shops, item shops, inns, and other stores that adventurers frequently use make this bustling street lively and crowded. Not only are there conventional shops, but if you turn a few corners into the alleyways, you can find many old-fashioned and peculiar-looking stores. The reason this street is called the Adventurer Street is not only because of the shops frequently visited by adventurers but also because the main headquarters of the Adventurers Guild, Pantheon, is located here. Compared to the branch office on the first floor of Tower of Babel, the main headquarters, built with pure white materials, resembles a temple and has a more sacred and solemn atmosphere. Basically, the functions that the branch office can perform are also available at the main headquarters, with additional features not found in the branch office. For example, considering currency exchange, the branch office on the first floor of Tower of Babel was established later, primarily for the convenience of adventurers. The money exchange in the branch office only supports the exchange of magic stones for small amounts and smaller sizes. For large magic stones found in the deeper levels of the dungeon or the substantial loot brought back from Familia expeditions, adventurers must go to Pantheon for exchange. When Luke and Ace crossed the road and arrived at Northwest Street, they immediately saw the guild headquarters adjacent to the street. Both Luke and Ace were visiting Pantheon for the first time. Standing at the entrance, they could see the spacious front courtyard and the large monument set within it. Perhaps because it was morning, most adventurers at this time were preparing to enter the dungeon. As a result, there were not many adventurers entering or leaving the guild building. The Pantheon is usually quite busy, responsible for operating Rio and managing all matters related to the dungeon. In addition to the adventurer registration procedures and listing them as residents of Rio and giving them a certain status and rights protection. And in order to use the profits gained from the dungeon to better develop the city, the guild also actively discloses a lot of knowledge and information about the dungeon to adventurers and will also assist in dungeon exploration. However, today, Luke and Ace were here for rest, so they did not enter Pantheon. After a brief visit and getting familiar with the place, they returned to the street. It was just past 8 in the morning. At this time, most adventurers were preparing to enter the dungeon, so the street was filled with crowds of adventurers getting ready to explore the dungeon. Demi-humans carrying large swords disappeared into weapon shops, Palums were busy going in and out of item shops, and there were many supporters with huge backpacks following behind adventurers. In this originally quiet and leisurely morning, Northwest Street was as lively and bustling as ever, living up to its name as the Adventurer Street. Luke, accompanied by Ace, navigated through the crowd. To prevent Ace from being swept away by the adventurers, he kept holding her small hand. Ace obediently followed Luke's steps. Not far into the street, they found their next destination, the Tien Sect Familia, from Riveria's commission. According to Riveria's description, the emblem of the Tien Sect Familia was a combination of a ball of light and a herb. The huge building made of pure white stone in front of Luke had exactly the same logo hanging on it. Chapter 75, Toy. Isn't this too big? Upon hearing that the Tien Sect Familia operated a pharmacy, Luke thought it would be similar to ordinary stores on the street. However, upon arriving at the entrance of the store with Ace, he realized that this was no ordinary shop. Compared to the adjacent stores, this pharmacy was more than 3 times larger. On this main street, various types of shops were lined up, including weapon shops and item shops, among others, and there was more than one of each type. Although the sizes of each shop varied, the differences weren't significant. However, among these shops of similar sizes, one suddenly emerged that occupied an area equivalent to 3 stores, making it almost as conspicuous as the guild headquarters they had just visited. Welcome. As Luke entered the store with Ace, a greeting came from the direction of the counter. The clerk behind the counter was a female human, appearing to be around 30 years old. She had short silver-white hair and was dressed in the uniform of the Tien Sect Familia, with a white color scheme. The Tien Sect Familia focused on pharmaceuticals and healing as the core of their life-oriented familia. Therefore, the majority of their female members were healers, and they had a considerable number of them. Hello, I am a member of Loki Familia, entrusted by Riveria to deliver this item to Tien Sect Familia. After explaining his background to the clerk, Luke handed over the commission letter. The silver-haired clerk took the commission letter, opened it to check its contents, and then politely said to Luke, "All right, I've received the commission letter on this end. Please wait a moment. Amid, come over for a moment." The silver-haired clerk called out to a lowly sitting in the distance inside the store, quietly reading a book. Hearing someone calling her, the little girl looked up and then put down her book before walking over. The approaching little girl, named Amid, had long silver-white hair matching the clerk's color. Her cute features and petite stature inevitably resembled an exquisite doll. "Did you call me?" Amid walked up to the silver-haired clerk and asked softly. "Yes, help me take this commission letter upstairs and deliver it to God Tien Sect." The silver-haired clerk gently patted Amid's small head, handing her the scroll. Amid nodded, holding the scroll, and turned to walk into the interior of the store, soon disappearing on the staircase. After handing over the scroll, the silver-haired clerk turned back to Luke, picked up a pen, and began writing something on the paper at the counter. While writing, she continued conversing with Luke. "Besides the commission letter, is there anything else you need? Our Tien Sect Familia's pharmacy is unparalleled in terms of potions and healing techniques in the entire city, you know. As a life-oriented familia, Having such a large store on the main streets indicated the considerable influence of Dian sect familia. Although their familia's primary activities were similar to other familias of the same type, involving selling their self-developed potions and elixirs. But they have high-end potions that are difficult to obtain from other stores and familia members. Moreover, besides selling potions, the Dian sect familia provides unique services that other familias do not offer. That is, they offer professional healing techniques and curative items specifically for injured/disabled adventurers. The healing services provided by Dian sect familia can even restore lost vision. Despite limited customers due to high pricing and target audience issues, they receive strong support from almost all high-level adventurers. The reason Dian sect familia store occupies such a large area is that it has many different sections inside. Apart from the outermost section for selling potions, there are also areas for treating patients, waiting rooms, and more. Overall, this store is actually a comprehensive facility with a nature similar to a hospital. When the clerk asked if there were any other needs, Luke looked down at Ace. Ace shook her head in response. "Sorry, we don't have any need for pharmaceuticals at the moment." After some consideration and confirming with Ace, Luke found that there was indeed no need in that regard and declined. "Well, that's a pity. If you have a chance in the future, please be sure to visit our store." The silver-haired clerk, who had just finished writing the letter, used tools prepared on the counter to seal the letter and then handed it to Luke. "Deliver this letter to Riveria-san, and your mission will be considered completed. Thank you." Taking the letter, Luke bid farewell to the clerk and then left the store with Ace, returning to the main street. Having successfully completed half of the mission, Luke wasn't in a hurry to move on to the next location. After all, the main focus for today was relaxation and rest. The Northwest Street here was one of the areas frequented by Loki Familia members, so it seemed worth exploring. After consulting Ace's opinion, the two decided to first explore the shops on this street that were essential for adventurers. Thus, Luke, accompanied by Ace, strolled from the weapon shop to the armor shop and then from the pharmacy to the item shop. The array of diverse and dazzling products truly opened Luke and Ace's eyes. As they walked out of the item shop, the two finally had something to show for their efforts. At this moment, Ace held a green, diamond-shaped gem in her hand. This was the only thing they bought after half a day of shopping, a magical item that could release a gentle breeze forward. The magic item stored enough mana for a single use, and afterward, it would need to be recharged by a mage to be used again. The breeze it released could ruffle a person's hair, making it a veritable toy. But there was no choice, both of them were financially tight. This single magical toy cost Ace her entire week's savings, with Luke also contributing a portion. It took the combined savings of both to purchase this toy. P.S. In reality, it wasn't that expensive, but since neither of them knew how to bargain, they ended up being overcharged. Although it didn't serve much practical purpose, Ace looked extremely happy. For Luke, this was the first time he had seen a smile on her face, even if it was just a faint one. Acquiring the small toy lifted Ace's spirits, which had been somewhat down since yesterday. Ace's smile also affected Luke, who was beside her. If relaxing their mood was one of the main goals of today's leisure, then they had undoubtedly achieved it. With cheerful hearts, the two continued to explore the shops. Chapter 76, I also want to use magic. Swish. Just finished with lunch, Luke sat on the street, taking a break with Ace, when a gentle breeze suddenly enveloped him. He ruffled his hair, tousled by the wind, and turned to look at the playful Ace beside him. Swish. As he turned his head to the side, another breeze blew on his face. Luke helplessly looked at Ace, enjoying herself next to him. Initially, he was surprised because Ace could recharge this magical toy on her own. But later, he thought that Ace's magic and skills probably appeared simultaneously with the blessing/falna given by Loki, similar to his two skills. It was precisely because of this that both of their status were placed under Loki's block. P.S. In the side story, Loki mentioned that Ace obtained Ariel and Avenger/Princess Revenge when receiving Falna. For Ace, who could use magic, recharging this low mana consumption toy wasn't strange at all. It's just that Ace had never used magic in front of him, so he didn't think about it before. Swish. His thoughts were interrupted by another breeze, and Luke sighed slightly. But then, he curiously asked Ace, you should know magic, right? Why don't you use it in the dungeon? Swish. Ace first blew a breeze in Luke's face again with the magical toy before answering. Because Riveria doesn't allow it. She's afraid that I won't be able to control Ariel, and will hurt myself. Hearing that it was Riveria's instruction, Luke didn't say anything more. Riveria, as the city's strongest mage, unquestionably had the highest proficiency in magic. If she made such a judgment, there must be a reason. However, judging by Ace's expression, she didn't seem to fully agree with it. When she mentioned that it was Riveria who forbade her to use magic, Ace's face showed a clear displeasure. The reason she had a special fondness for such a simple magical toy that blows wind was probably to satisfy her emotional desire to want to use magic. The noon break was short, and after completing the rest after lunch task, Luke was about to continue his journey with Ace in the afternoon. They had explored most of the main parts of the Northwest Street in the morning, even though there were still many places left to visit. However, they had already seen the main core areas. So, next, they were heading to West Main Street, which was a bit further from the Familia's residence. But before that, they had to take a detour to complete the task assigned to Luke by Riveria. The Goibnia Familia was located at the intersection of North Street and Northwest Street, and its family emblem was 3 hammers. This family operated a blacksmith shop, a stone-built cottage deep in the back alley. Perhaps due to its remote location, the nearby houses were arranged without any order, and the alleys were both narrow and winding, creating an atmosphere that couldn't be described as grand or elegant. Although the Goibnia Familia was known as a powerful forging familia only recognized by insiders, its location was indeed less than commendable. The Goibnia Familia specialized in equipment maintenance, repair, and crafting, handling weapons, armor, and other equipment. While their fame and influence were far lower than their counterpart, the top-ranked Hephaestus Familia, in the city, the performance of the equipment they produced was comparable, making them a sturdy and reliable familia. Unlike the Hephaestus Familia, which constantly produced weapons and equipment for adventurers to choose from, the Goibnia Familia mostly crafted weapons and equipment upon receiving specific commissions. It was this high-quality custom characteristic that earned them a loyal customer base, with the Loki Familia being one of the largest groups among them. Through the narrow paths of the back alley, Luke, accompanied by Ace, entered the building that contrasted sharply with the workshop. The interior was just as dim as the outside, with several massive forges manned by blacksmiths. Nearby, some were using tools to carve metal, and several craftsmen were deeply engrossed in their work. Luke stopped a craftsman who didn't seem too busy and said to him, "Hello, I'm a member of Loki Familia, entrusted by Riveria to deliver this commission letter to Goibnia Familia." Loki Familia. Haven't seen your face before. Are you a newcomer? The craftsman took the commission letter from Luke. After opening and confirming its contents, he shouted to the people behind him, "Hey! An order from Loki Familia just came in. Looks like we have some work to do." Upon hearing that it was an order from the Loki Familia, many craftsmen and blacksmiths who were not busy with their work stopped and gathered around. "Oh, finally, another big order. What is it this time?" "A large quantity of weapons and equipment, or customizing first-class weapons? It seems to be the renovation of Twilight Manor." "Ha! Are these 2 new members of Loki Familia?" They both look quite young. Luke wasn't surrounded for too long. After the commission letter was swiftly snatched by a few alert blacksmiths, the crowd's attention shifted to another direction. In the original spot, only the blacksmith Luke had called out to remained. Don't mind them, they're always like this." The craftsman scratched his head, a bit embarrassed, and took out a pre-prepared letter from the side. "We received news about this order in advance. Thanks for delivering the official commission letter. This is our reply, take it back and give it to Finn and the others." The craftsman handed over the letter, intending to join the crowd and take a closer look at the details of the order. However, before he could take a step, Luke caught hold of him. "Wait a moment, I have some personal matters to attend to." "Ha! Ah! Sorry, I almost left the guest stranded here. The craftsman, caught by Luke, was momentarily surprised, then awkwardly chuckled. So, what's the matter? Customizing weapons, or equipment repairs? Luke handed the gem to the craftsman and asked, do you accept processed ores like this for refining here? What Luke presented was a piece of manadite processed into the core of a luxe armament. The craftsman looked at the ore in his hand with solemnity, carefully examined it, then placed it on a nearby workbench for a detailed inspection. After some examination, he astonishedly asked Luke, where did you get this? Chapter 77, Mother's Embrace. Undoubtedly, this processed ore is a type that hasn't been discovered yet. Did you find it in the dungeon? The craftsman asked Luke in amazement. His voice was slightly louder, probably due to his astonishment. Restlessness spread through the crowd that had been surrounding the commission letter upon hearing about an unknown ore. What? An ore. A type of unknown ore. Where is it? Let me have a look. Seeing the crowd starting to gather again, Luke quickly explained, it's not from the dungeon, I brought it from outside Oreo. Upon hearing that it wasn't a newly discovered ore from the dungeon, the craftsman's emotions calmed a bit, but they still gathered around the manadite crystal, studying it continuously. Kid, bring it over here for me to see, a voice came from inside the blacksmith shop. Upon hearing the old man speak, the craftsmen all calmed down and cleared a path, allowing Luke to take the processed manadite ore into the room. Inside the room, Luke and Ace were greeted by an elderly-looking male deity, the owner of this blacksmith shop, God Goibniu. His pale hair, paired with a white beard that just covered his mouth, made people vaguely think of dwarves. God Goibniu didn't look at the ore but first observed Luke and Ace. I see, Loki seems to have found 2 treasures. Unexpectedly saying this sentence, God Goibniu took the ore from Luke's hand. The ore has been processed to the point where it can't be restored. Generally, we don't accept such materials here. However, it is indeed a type not found in Oreo, and I sense a power different from mana within it. After assessing the manadite ore and feeling its toughness with his hand, God Goibniu said to Luke, I can't offer you a high price, how about 200,000 valis? Valis is the unit of currency used in Oreo. While 200,000 valis might seem like a small amount compared to the millions required for top-tier equipment, it's still a substantial sum. For adventurers like Luke and Ace, who operate primarily in the upper floors and have limited earnings, it can help alleviate their current financial difficulties. No problem, I can accept this price. After completing the transaction, Luke bid farewell to God Goibniu and his familia, leaving the place. With the money in hand and the task accomplished, it was time to enjoy themselves. This time, Luke and Ace didn't have to face the same situation as in the morning, where everything seemed unaffordable. Unlike the Northwest Street, the West Street of Oreo is inhabited by many ordinary citizens. Oreo, with its main industry being the trade of magic stone products, employs many workers responsible for production. The number of employees determined by the guild is said to be even more than the adventurers exploring the dungeon. Of course, these workers also reside within the city. Most of the non-familia members, who have not joined any familia, settle in the West Street. Many residents live with their families, and over time, a large residential area has formed here. West Street also has many shops, some run by adventurers, and others by ordinary residents. Compared to Northwest Street, which is mostly occupied by adventurers, West Street feels more simple and natural. Many adventurers come here to pursue the simple local girls. After all, most adventurers have some sort of psychological problem, including women. Besides, powerful women adventurers look down on weak male adventurers, making it harder for most male adventurers to find suitable partners. As Luke led Ace through the West Street, it felt much quieter than the Northwest Street. Walking down the streets here gave them the feeling of strolling in the countryside. Orario's 8 main streets each have a completely different style, making it hard to believe they are scenes within the same city. The shops in West Street are different from the ones on Northwest Street. It's hard to find adventure-specific stores like weapon or equipment shops. Instead, there are more leisurely and relaxing stores such as flower shops, candy stores, clothing stores, and snack shops, catering to the general public. Just like in the morning, Luke and Ace continued to explore one shop after another. With money in hand this time, they not only bought a few everyday clothes but also purchased many snacks and candies. Initially, Ace was hesitant to use Luke's money to buy things for herself. But after Luke's persuasion and agreeing that she would have to pay it back to him in the future, Ace finally accepted Luke's generosity. Because they ate a lot of snacks and candies along the way, Luke and Ace didn't feel hungry. They walked all the way from the center of West Street to the city wall. Throughout the whole day, both Luke and Ace had a great time. Swish! Standing on the city wall, they felt the breeze blowing from Ace's hand while gazing at the gradually darkening sky. Swish! Seeing Ace still happily playing with her magic toy, a sudden thought crossed Luke's mind. Although Riveria forbade Ace from using magic, Luke could find other ways to let Ace experience the feeling of being surrounded by wind. Ace, do you want to experience something similar to your magic? Luke turned his head and asked Ace, who was holding his arm. Upon hearing Luke's question, Ace's eyes showed a bit of anticipation, but it was soon replaced by disappointment. But Riveria didn't tell me the incantation to activate magic. It's okay. I can let you experience the feeling of using magic. Luke smiled at Ace. Then, blue starlight fragments began to appear around him. Although Luke didn't have profound knowledge of Seizenjutsu, he could still perform basic spells. With a few hand seals in his hands, a gentle breeze surrounded Ace. The green wind around Ace had no power, but it could move with her thought. Ace looked at the wind around her. Perhaps due to the influence of prana, the emerald wind also carried faint blue starlight. Experiencing the feeling of manipulating the wind, Ace, who had been longing for it, felt the warmth similar to her mother. The breeze enveloped her, as if she had returned to her mother's embrace. Ace stood still for a long time, only regaining awareness when the prana maintaining the wind was exhausted. She silently walked to Luke's side and tugged at his clothes. Thank you. You're welcome. In the air, there seemed to be some drops of tears scattering with the wind. Chapter 78, Butterfly Effect. Knock, knock, knock. Come in. Upon hearing the sound from inside the door, Luke pushed it open and entered. This marked his second time in this meeting room, the first being during the interview. Unlike the last time, this time, besides Loki, Finn, Riveria, and Gareth were all present. If we exclude Luke, this was obviously an internal high-level meeting within the Loki familia. Come over and have a seat, Luke. Seeing Luke's somewhat puzzled expression, Finn spoke to him first. We called you here this time to confirm something with you. Luke walked over and, as Finn suggested, sat down on the chair. He was genuinely confused because, in all likelihood, this seemed to be a high-level meeting, and as a newcomer, he shouldn't be participating. However, after observing the expressions on Finn and the others' faces, he decided to temporarily set aside his confusion and listen to what they had to say. Finn and Gareth's expressions were relatively normal, albeit tinged with a hint of helplessness. On the other hand, Loki and Riveria seemed exceptionally abnormal. Loki was sitting on the side, grinning as if she had found something interesting. The most intriguing one was Riveria. Ever since he entered, Riveria had been staring at him intently. Although Luke didn't sense any malicious intent or resentment, being stared at like that made even someone like him feel uneasy. Firstly, I want to inform you that the expedition is scheduled for 3 days from now. Even after Luke sat down, Finn began to speak without directly explaining the reason for calling him here. This time, I plan to have you and Ace join as well, considering it as an opportunity for you both to gain experience. Well seated, Luke responded, if that's the case, you could have informed me later when notifying the entire familia. Was it necessary to specifically call me here? Moreover, he feels like Riveria has some opinions about him. Luke was perplexed because just yesterday, Riveria spent the entire day in the dungeon with him and Ace, seemingly unchanged. Luke, I have a question for you. On leisure day a week ago, you and Ace. Alright, Riveria, let me speak. Upon hearing Luke's words, Riveria couldn't hold back and began to hastily ask, but Finn stopped her midway. Finn glanced at the mischievous Loki beside him, then sighed and said to Luke, you should know that both you and Ace are quite special, right? Luke nodded. He had learned about this on the first day he joined Loki Familia. Now, do you understand why Ace is special? Finn continued his questioning. This time, Luke hesitated slightly but eventually nodded. I knew it must be related to him. That's enough, Riveria. Calm down. This was Loki's first time speaking, but instead of confronting Luke like Riveria, she stopped Riveria from continuing on. Hearing this, Luke more or less understood what was going on. Combining Riveria's interrupted words earlier, he had a vague guess about why he was called here. We don't know how much you know about Ace, but what I'm going to tell you next is about Ace's magic and skills. Finn saw Loki stopping Riveria and continued with a sigh of relief. When Ace first received Falna, she gained a magic and a skill at the same time. Magic and skills are crucial for adventurers. Each new skill acquisition represents significant progress for an adventurer. However, skills are not easy to obtain, and many adventurers go their entire lives without obtaining any. This is even more true for someone like Ace, who has such an exceptional skill. Just last night, because we decided to take you and Ace on the expedition, Riveria took Ace to Loki for status update and check on her progress. It was at that moment that Loki discovered Ace had gained an additional skill. That's the reason we called you here today. Having said that, Finn paused for a moment, looked at Riveria, and then continued. According to Riveria, during this period, you, Ace, and Riveria were basically together. Only last week, there was one day when only you and Ace were together. The acquisition of adventurer skills is related to their essence, emotions, interests, and psychological changes. During the time that Ace was following Riveria, nothing happened that might cause changes in her skills. Therefore, there was only one possibility: the day Riveria wasn't with Ace, specifically the last week rest day. Although it had only been half a month, Riveria, who lived and dined with Ace, had already regarded her as an important junior, or maybe daughter. Now, Ace had undergone a drastic change that Riveria hadn't noticed, and it was only natural for Mama Elf to be worried. Generally, acquisition of skills is considered a good thing, as it means gaining a new ability. However, Ace was in a different situation. Her original skill, Avenger/Revenge Princess, was exceptionally dangerous. Now, under this skill, there's another. A skill that hasn't fully awakened yet. Just thinking that Avenger skill makes Ace fall into the side effects of endless slaughter and hatred. Riveria couldn't help but worry about whether this new skill would also have similar side effects. After listening to Finn's explanation, Luke finally understood the cause and effect of the situation. He hadn't expected that his unintentional actions would lead to such a significant change in Ace. However, considering the circumstances of that day, Luke believed that the newly emerged skill was likely related to Ace recalling memories of her mother and not necessarily a bad thing. Subsequently, Luke explained in detail the events of that day to Finn and the others. During Luke's explanation, Finn and the others, including Loki, remained silent, listening carefully. After hearing and analyzing Luke's description, they all affirmed Luke's perspective. Based on the analysis of the situation at that time, it was evident that Ace had undergone a change under the influence of warm emotions. Therefore, the skill born from this should also be a positive skill without side effects. However, the conclusion led to an awkward situation. They had created such a big scene, subjecting Luke to a kind of unfair interrogation, only to find out that Luke had done a good deed. Now, all eyes were suddenly focused on Riveria, who had just felt relieved. Chapter 79, a brand new starting line. Now, the pressure had shifted from Luke to Riveria. Recognizing her mistake, Riveria's face visibly turned redder. I'm very sorry. Riveria stood up, walked to Luke, and bowed deeply. Now that she recalls her previous actions, it was indeed inappropriate. Although it was just a suspicion, I did speculate about a fellow member of the same familia with ill intentions. I am truly sorry. Riveria's decisive apology caught Luke off guard. He didn't expect her to apologize so decisively. In reality, Riveria hadn't done much, she had merely associated Ace's change with Luke. Despite the positive outcome, this situation was indeed caused by Luke. From the conclusion, Riveria's speculation wasn't entirely wrong. The original purpose of calling Luke here today was to confirm whether Ace's changes were related to him. The change in Ace that caused Riveria's concern was a sensitive matter, and there was no room for any negligence. Alright, Riveria is also concerned about Ace. Luke, don't blame her. Seeing that the situation was basically settled, Loki stepped forward to smooth things over. Well, from the beginning, I never meant to blame Riveria. Luke looked deeply at Loki. He couldn't shake the feeling that this goddess had anticipated how things would unfold. After all, when Luke entered, it was a serious occasion, yet Loki had been grinning from the start to finish. What was the situation with the unawakened skill on Ace's status? Loki, being her goddess, should be the one most aware of it. And the reason she deliberately didn't mention it. Luke glanced at the somewhat embarrassed Riveria and sighed silently in his heart. Loki probably intentionally made Riveria worry. The following actions by Loki confirmed Luke's suspicion. Speaking of which, when Riveria learned about Ace's changes, she was quite worried. Could this be a case of a mother worrying about her daughter? Loki, with an evil grin, approached Riveria, teasing her incessantly. Who's a mother? I'm still single. Riveria forcibly suppressed her anger and glared at Loki. But Loki had no intention of letting go of this topic. We all know about it. Being single is just an excuse, a way for long-lived species to disguise their age. You guys are always like this, trying to cover up the fact that you are older. Smash. Almost immediately, Riveria's magic staff about the height of a person fiercely struck Loki's calf before she could utter that taboo word. With her face turning red, Riveria glared down at her familiar goddess, who was rolling on the ground in pain. Gareth, standing nearby, hurriedly pulled Luke aside, while Finn sighed and approached to mediate. After the commotion, the atmosphere among the group returned to its original harmony. P.S. Whenever there is trouble within the familia or the team, Loki always manages to instantly lighten the mood with her playful remarks. This might be Loki's unique way of comforting others. At this point, Luke brought up another matter regarding Ace. Finn, there's something I'd like to discuss with you all. Again, it's related to Ace. Although Loki holds the highest status among the five, it is generally Finn who takes the lead in decision-making within Loki familia. When Luke spoke up, the atmosphere, which had just eased, became serious again. However, with Luke's current influence, confirmed to have a positive impact on Ace, his words carried more weight. Finn and the others didn't interrupt Luke but signaled him to continue. I believe Ace should not be forbidden from using magic. This statement from Luke immediately stirred up Riveria again. However, this time, perhaps having learned from the earlier lesson, Riveria didn't directly oppose Luke's opinion. Instead, she calmly expressed her own views. You should be aware of the power of Ace's skill, Avenger/Princess Revenge. Possessing such formidable strength at such a young age, if she were to use magic as well. Avenger/Princess Revenge. Asterisk activation at will. Asterisk enhancement of attack power against monster species. Asterisk superior enhancement of attack power against dragon species. Asterisk as the intensity of hatred deepens, effect of skill increases. Loki judged this skill to be an amplification skill without limits. However, its side effects lead Ace to constantly harbor hatred towards monsters and, specifically, Black Dragon while using the skill. Riveria and the others prohibited Ace from using magic to slow down her growth, allowing her to build a solid foundation and strengthen her inner self during the growing process, preventing her from being consumed by the dark flames of vengeance within her heart. So, you didn't tell Ace the incantation for her magic. If it weren't for the inability to prohibit the skill, you probably would have forbidden her from using it as well, right? Since you know that, why suggest letting Ace use magic? Riveria's haste gradually transformed into confusion because Luke's analysis was mostly correct, aligning with the final result of Finn and the others' discussions. But the problem lies in the fact that you can't prohibit the Avenger skill. Have you ever considered why Ace's magic and skill appeared? Luke's words prompted a sudden realization in Finn. He asked in surprise, are you saying that Ariel doesn't come from hatred as we originally thought? Perhaps misled by Ace's background and tragic vow, or due to concerns about the side effects of the Avenger skill, Finn and the others always believed that burial also stemmed from Ace's inner hatred. Luke nodded at Finn. Exactly, I believe burial comes from Ace's love and longing for her mother. Motherly love and father's hatred are the essence of Ace's two abilities. Now, what Finn and the others have done is to prohibit Ace's love, pushing her continuously towards the direction of hatred. Then, haven't we made a mistake? After hearing Luke's explanation, Riveria was stunned, finding it difficult to accept that she had almost harmed Ace. Meanwhile, Finn contemplated for a while and eventually made a decision. The decision on this matter will be temporarily postponed. I need to observe further before reaching a conclusion. Everything will be decided after the expedition in 3 days. Let's wait until it concludes before making any judgments. Chapter 80, The Beginning of the Expedition. As the expedition was scheduled to take place in 3 days, during this time, members of Loki Familia were primarily engaged in preparing for the upcoming venture. Luke's daily life didn't change much. The only difference was that the time spent in the dungeon was relatively reduced, leaving him with some time to rest and recharge. On the other hand, Ace, upon learning that she would participate in the expedition with the team, appeared exceptionally excited. She was always more enthusiastic than anyone else about delving into the dungeon and defeating monsters. The 3 days passed quickly. The final number of participants in the expedition was confirmed to be 29. The target of this expedition was located on the 37th floor, Monster Rex Eudeus. Finn, with the current strength of our team, challenging Eudeus, isn't that a bit rushed? While on the way to the dungeon, Gareth walked beside Finn and asked him. Finn nodded at first, then shook his head. I know Eudeus has a potential ability value as high as level 6, and as a floor boss, its strength far exceeds that of an ordinary level 6 monster. However, we indeed need to pick up the pace. I heard that Vice Captain Otter from Freya Familia might be close to leveling up. What? Finn's words made Gareth inhale sharply. Now, Loki Familia and Freya Familia, jointly considered the strongest factions in Orario, were so designated because they had more than one first-class adventurer. Freya Familia had 2, one level 5 and one level 6, serving as the Familia's captain and vice-captain, respectively. Loki Familia also had 3, which were Finn, Gareth, and Riveria, all at LV5. P.S. They became level 6 7 years before the start of the storyline. So, let's assume they're only level 5 now. Loki Familia and Freya Familia, both consisting of a small but elite group of members. Therefore, a change in high-end combat strength indicates a shift in the Familia's overall power. If Otter, serving as vice-captain, were to upgrade to level 7 while Finn and his group remained unchanged, it might not pose an immediate concern. However, over time, their status as one of the strongest could be at risk. The challenge against Eudeus this time was Finn's plan for the trio to level up. The expedition team quickly entered the dungeon. With their large numbers, the movements and noises they made during their journey attracted a multitude of monsters. Facing these monsters from the novice and even upper floors, Finn and his group had no intention of fighting. Not even the level 3 adventurers in the team were eager to fight these small fries. After all, one of the main objectives of the expedition was training. Luke's current task was simple, slicing through these monsters. As he observed Ace charging into the monsters with emotionless determination, he followed closely behind her. Swoosh! With 2 swift slashes, Luke cleared out the approaching monsters and joined Ace. Finn had instructed him to keep a close eye on Ace, ensuring she wasn't emotionally stimulated and stayed connected with the team. The monsters from the upper floors were no match for Loki Familia's expedition team. In less than half a day, the team advanced to the 10th floor. However, their seemingly unstoppable progress began to slow down here. Upon entering the 10th floor, a dense mist covered their vision. The reduced visibility made the entire team more cautious. As they proceeded carefully, a colossal silver-white gorilla suddenly crashed into the center of the group with a deafening roar. Elite monster, silverback ape. Roar! Accompanying the appearance of the silverback ape were several imps surrounding them from all sides. The sudden attack by Silverback Ape resulted in the team's first casualties, followed by a sense of unease and panic. Fortunately, Finn's orders came in time. Don't panic. Level 3 adventurers, intercept the Silverback Ape and prevent it from disrupting the team's formation. Level 1 adventurers without injuries, form groups of 3 and prepare to counter the imps. Level 2 adventurers, escort the injured out of the battlefield, then come back to assist. Give priority to eliminating the Silverback Ape. Finn's commands, echoed on the battlefield, instantly restored order. The entire team began to operate according to Finn's instructions. Luke didn't pay attention to the team's situation. Instead, he focused on the spot where the Silverback Ape had come from, sensing something amiss. Finn had positioned Luke close to their core members, and until the mid-floors, Luke didn't need to intervene in the battle and only needed to keep an eye on Ace. However, Finn's separate order synchronized with Luke's premonition. Luke, go check the place where the Silverback Ape jumped from. If anything seems off, come back immediately and report. Gareth, temporarily watch over Ace. Riveria, go call the mage team and prepare for chanting. Upon hearing Finn's command, completely in line with his premonition, Luke didn't hesitate. He activated his prana and instantly rushed outside the team. Within seconds, Luke traversed the thick fog and arrived on a nearby rocky peak. There, he saw one of the dungeon's most powerful monsters in the upper floors, a dragon-type monster called Infant Dragon. Roar! As soon as Luke noticed it, the infant dragon also spotted Luke. Recalling the situation the team faced against monsters earlier, Luke decided to slay this infant dragon here. If let go, it might cause unnecessary casualties within the team. Dragon-type monsters possess massive bodies. Even the lowest-class infant dragon was much larger than the Silverback Ape. As it charged towards Luke, it seemed like a gigantic truck was rushing at him. Swoosh! Unfortunately for the infant dragon, Luke's strength far surpassed that of a dragon-type monster that can only dominate the upper floors. In the first strike, he directly severed its right leg. In the moment it lost balance, Luke appeared above it, nailing it to the ground from top to bottom. Bang! Crunch! Easily dealing with the infant dragon, Luke not only heard the sound of the monster dissipating but also another crisp noise. Following the sound, he looked at the standardized weapon Loki Familia had given him. Normally, it would be impossible for such a standardized rookie weapon to penetrate a dragon-type monster's scales. However, under the additional bonus of Luke's sword chi, it effortlessly achieved what seemed impossible. The cost, though, was the shattered blade due to being unable to withstand Luke's strength. Luke looked at the now unusable weapon in his hand with a touch of helplessness. He had anticipated that an ordinary standardized weapon wouldn't be able to handle his excessive strength, so he had tried his best to reduce his strength. Otherwise, dealing with upper-floor monsters like this infant dragon would be as easy as cutting through butter.